Hello, I'm Charles Moffat, and it is book review time. Today I'm going to be talking about Blood Song by Anthony Ryan, Tower Lord, also by Anthony Ryan, and Queen of Fire, you guessed it, by Anthony Ryan. So, I'm going to start by saying I read I read this book back in 2012, 2013, around that time roughly, and then eventually read this one, and then finally I finished reading this one this past winter. And I've been wanting to do the book review for a while, but I wanted to do all three book reviews at the same time, was the thing. So, let's get started here. This book, when I first read it, it felt a bit like the first half of the book, to me, felt like a Harry Potter book. And I remember reading it and thinking, oh, this should be a movie. And then I kept reading and I was like, no, this can't be a movie. It's too complicated. It can't be a movie. It would have to be a TV show, at least. It would have to be like a Game of Thrones style TV show. And I'm sure Anthony would appreciate my comment there, because he would probably love to sell this as a TV show and be like, yes, please turn this into a TV show. But I'm going to explain a bit about how magic works a bit in this world. I'm not going to ruin the plot, but I am going to talk about how magic works in his world. Magic in the world of Blood Song and the other books is basically a bit like the mutant abilities from X-Men. Okay, so people are born with these abilities, and they refer to it as being magical. Well, no, that's not completely true. He almost never uses the word magic in the book. He refers to it usually as the dark. So, as in dark magic. So people don't use the word magic very often. They just say the dark. So it's like these dark powers that people have, but they're not actually dark. It's just that it's kind of like a Salem witch trial in that sense. It's like people are looking for dark magic so badly, and they just the government and religion has basically stamped it out and trying to get rid of anybody who has dark magic, or they call it dark magic because they just consider all magic to be dark. So they're not very understanding in that respect. So immediately you're coming from is the perspective of the main character, who he gets basically shipped off to military school, and one of the roles of this military school is to train these young boys into soldiers, and not just any soldiers, but the elite soldiers. And one of the things that comes up is that that dark powers are illegal, and the government's looking for you, and the religions don't really like you either, and he has to go through this whole process of realizing that he has powers. So in that respect, the first half of the book reminded me a lot of Harry Potter, but it was a case of he ages a lot faster than Harry Potter, because partway through the book suddenly he's an adult, and it's like, okay, so he just went through the years of training all in the first half of the book. So just was that was what was similar to Harry Potter, whereas in Harry Potter it was each book represents roughly 1 year of time, one school year. In this, all of those school years basically just go whoosh by very quickly, but at the same time it's very dense. It's like there's a lot of things happening at the same time. And there's one of the things I like about these books is that there's a lot of stuff about swords, there's a lot of archery, there's a lot of throwing knives going on, a lot of daggers and throwing knives. I do feel like maybe there could have been more done with pole arms and things like that, but teach their own. Fair bit of horses, but definitely well written literary fantasy. So there is some action definitely happening, and it's also epic fantasy. That's the other thing to remember here. Stylistically, I compare this to David Eddings' work from the 1990s, and yeah, that time period for David Eddings' work. So I don't know if he actually read David Eddings' work, but it felt very similar to me. and then definitely had the whole X-Men vibes going on at the same time. Now, the second half of the book basically gets into the plot more. Like, the first half is basically like all the characters are getting older, so it's not just the main character, Valen. Okay, the main character is Valen, and then the plot goes from there to, like, he's got some romance going on, and then there's, of course, some military stuff that happens. So I'm not going to ruin the plot as far as that goes, but he definitely shows up and uses his abilities and makes it very is secretly using his abilities. That's the other thing that has to go on here. He has to use his abilities to stay alive, but also is secretly using them. And then, of course, what happens if he runs into somebody who also has abilities? Because that kind of levels the playing field a lot. So you have to take that into consideration. But honestly, this is like one of the best epic fantasy books I've ever read. And I've read quite a few. And pretty good on the literary fantasy. There is a few complaints that I have about Anthony's books, but they're comparatively minor. They're so minor that, like, they're not worth worrying about. Like, I'll give you an example. In the second book, there's a bunch of characters that I feel that it feels like they have the same personality. Like, they don't really have much of a personality. Like, they're there and they kind of just feel like carbon copies. Now, I don't know if that's Anthony's fault. That could be the editor's fault. It could be that they had more personality, and then the editor, came along and said, yeah, these characters don't need personalities because they're not important enough. And now, just for context, let's look at the back of the book here, and you'll see just how many characters there are. Okay, so this is the Dramatique Cossonay. Okay, so it's a big long list of all the different characters in the books. It's not just one page. It's not 3 pages. Yeah, it just keeps going. Okay, and then there's the rules for this card game. Yeah, and I dropped the first book on the ground in the. Oh dear. Yeah, so my one big complaint is that there's a number of characters in the second book who I feel are kind of generic, like they don't have much personality. But if that's my only complaint, there's not much to complain about, It's not a big deal, and I probably, I do question, is that the editor's fault for just editing out any personality from those characters? Because they felt it was unnecessary or something like that. Who knows? That was the one big thing that bothered me. Now, if I'm going to talk about the second book, this to me is actually the best book of the series. It kind of, like, a good chunk of this book was basically spent introducing characters and, like, them growing up and becoming warriors and things like that. So that was the good roughly half the book right there. This gets much more interesting because it introduces a number of new characters and puts greater emphasis on other characters that were first introduced over here. And then it's that interplay of the different characters that makes this book more interesting. And by the time you get to the third book, it's basically a case of, like, okay, all the characters are doing their different things, and you kind of just want to get to the end, and you want to, get to the end and be like, okay, this is good. Now, when I read this particular one, I also got the audiobook version, and the audiobook version was quite good. And what I did was I would read the book and listen to the audiobook at the same time. So it was kind of a case of, like, I was doubling up on it, and that allowed me to basically read it faster to some extent. Because one of the things I do is, well, I'll be reading something, and I'll read the paragraph over again, like, twice, or I'll get distracted or things like that. And that's been a problem for me in the last year, where I'll be reading something and I'll get distracted by something, and I have to read the paragraph over again and again. And it happens so many times for me that I've reached the point that I find audiobooks are very handy so that I can read the book and listen to the audiobook at the same time. And the audiobook forces me to keep reading. I don't stop and read the paragraph over again. And it also keeps me focused. So that definitely helps. So yeah, as a group, these 3 books are very, very good. I definitely recommend them. And you know what? Anthony Ryan came out with more books. He came out with another series of books. And I kind of complained to him on Twitter. I was like, man, you keep writing the books too damn fast. How am I supposed to read them all? And he kind of like laughed, or yeah, it's just that's just the thing, you know. He's writing the books so damn fast, and I can't keep up. And I'm writing my own books at the same time, and I have to read other people's books, and it just it takes a while for me to get through a big book. And this one is pretty big. Like, if you looked at this is 600 plus pages. Yeah. And then what's this one? This one's another 600 plus pages. Yeah. So they're big books, but you definitely get your money's worth, because they're very good. So yeah, go, if you like epic fantasy, do check out Anthony Ryan's books. And if you like fantasy in general, check out my books. You know, go on Amazon, type in Charles Moffat. You'll find my books. There's a whole bunch of them on there. Many different fantasy styles that I write. Anyway, have a good day. Bye-bye.